Congressman Doug LaMalfa. Washington Journal is next.
So today, I'm moving past Republican obstruction and using the executive authorities available to me as president to do what I can on my own to address the border.
Good morning. It's Wednesday, June 5th. You just heard President Biden announcing new measures at the Mexico border. They bar migrants from seeking asylum if they cross between points of entry. Those actions will likely be challenged in court. During our first half hour, we're getting your reaction. Our phone lines are Republicans, 202-748-8001. Democrats, call us on 202-748-8000. And Independents, it's 202-748-8002. We have a line for residents of southern border states. It's 202-748-8003. You can use that same line to text us. Include your first name and your city, state. We're on social media, facebook.com/cspan and X at cspanwj. Welcome to today's 2-hour Washington Journal. The House will gavel in at 9 a.m. Let's take a look at some of the details of the executive action announced yesterday by the president. It bars migrants from claiming asylum when U.S. officials deem the southern border is overwhelmed. It goes into effect when the number of border encounters between ports of entry hits 2,500 per day. And just note that threshold, according to administration officials, has already been hit over the past week. So that ban is in effect as of midnight. The restrictions would be in effect until 2 weeks after the daily encounter numbers are at or below 1,500 per day or fewer for at least a week. And the ban does exempt unaccompanied children. Let's take a look at more from President Biden from yesterday talking about these measures.
Frankly, I would have preferred to address this issue through bipartisan legislation because that's the only way to actually get the kind of system we have now that's broken, fixed, to hire more Border Patrol agents, more asylum officers, more judges. But Republicans have left me no choice. Today, I'm announcing actions to bar migrants who cross our southern border unlawfully from receiving asylum. Migrants will be restricted from receiving asylum at our southern border unless they seek it after entering through an established lawful process. And those who seek to come to the United States legally, for example, by making an appointment and coming to a port of entry, asylum will still be available to them, still available. But if an individual chooses not to use our legal pathways, if they choose to come without permission and against the law, they'll be restricted from receiving asylum and staying in the United States. This action will help us gain control of our border, restore order to the process. This ban will remain in place until the number of people trying to enter illegally is reduced to a level that our system can effectively manage. We'll carry out this order consistent with all our responsibilities under international law, every one of them.
We are getting your reaction to that announcement from President Biden yesterday regarding action at the southern border. Here is thehill.com with this article, ACLU to challenge Biden's border action. Same approach as Trump asylum ban. It says that the American Civil Liberties Union said Tuesday it planned to sue the Biden administration over a newly unveiled policy that will restrict asylum claims at the southern border. The Biden administration just announced an executive order that will severely restrict people's legal right to seek asylum, putting tens of thousands of lives at risk. The organization posted on the social platform X. They added, this action takes the same approach as the Trump administration's asylum ban. We will be challenging this order in court. The White House on Tuesday took long-expected executive action that will turn away migrants seeking asylum who cross the southern border illegally at times when there is a high volume of daily encounters. The order will be in effect until the 7-day average of daily border crossings exceeds 2,500 between ports of entry, senior administration officials say, meaning it will go into effect immediately. And it says that senior administration officials told reporters on a call previewing the announcement that they were prepared to defend the measure in court, asserting they had the authority to implement the policy. We want to know what you think, and we'll just take a look at Speaker Mike Johnson, he was speaking yesterday about this, and note that this was before the president made the formal announcement.
It will ignore multiple elements that have to be addressed, the elements that were in our legislation that we passed over 14 months ago, to fix the broken asylum program, to fix the broken parole process, to reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy, to end the catch and release policy that they've advanced. Those are the reasons that this catastrophe has been allowed to continue, and whatever little short measure that he's going to do here is not going to solve the problem. In fact, by some estimates, it might make it worse because it will extend once again the welcome mat. Incentivize people to come and be among the first 2,500 is what we're hearing. The first 2,500 per day to come in to be ensured that you get your welcome package when you come into the country illegally. It's absolute madness. They're going to say he's using Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act. You know what? I read him that provision myself on the telephone a year ago, 7 months ago, I know, after I became Speaker, we had this conversation. I told him this. First, he tried to tell me it didn't exist. Then I read him the language on the phone. Later, I met with him in person, reiterated the same language. And that provision is so broad, it allows the president to use his authority unilaterally if he determines it to be in the best interest of the country. If it's detrimental to the interest of our country, he can close the border down entirely. He's not going to do that. He has no interest in doing that. They want it wide open. So this weak measure here, don't be fooled. One executive order can in no way undo the 64 specific executive actions he's already taken and 3.5 years of chaos that they've allowed to ensue.
And let's go to the phones with Julian up first in Stamford, Connecticut, Republican. Good morning.
Good morning, Mimi. How are you?
Good.
Just want to make a couple of little points. So I guess 50 million is enough, but not really, because he's still allowing 2,500 every day to come in. It's too late. He's destroyed this country with these 50 million illegals that have entered this country. God only knows how many people, they're terrorists, But that's all I wanted to say, Mimi. It's lovely to see you. You look beautiful as usual.
Thank you. And this is the Gallup poll. This is from about a month ago, end of April, that says this, that immigration named top U.S. problem for third straight month. Immigration has been the most politically polarizing issue mentioned in the past 25 years. A couple of graphs to show you here. Well, the graphs aren't coming in, but it says that Republicans are far more likely than Democrats and independents to name immigration as the most important issue. In the latest poll, 48% of Republicans compared with 8% of Democrats mention immigration. Independents fall roughly in the middle at 25%. It says that Republicans' mention of the issue has come down from February, when a record high 57% named it. Fewer Democrats now than in 2019, when as many as 20% mentioned it, say immigration is the top problem. Meanwhile, independents' latest mention of immigration is at a new high, although statistically similar readings were recorded in 2019 and in recent months. Let's go to Michael in Four Oaks, North Carolina, Republican. Hey, Michael.
Good morning, Mimi.
What's been going on, Michael?
Oh, the presidential election, but now we're talking about immigration again, and that's what's going on. I think abortion is going to be the top issue again in the election, and I know that's not the topic, but you should consider that a topic soon this summer, coming up, maybe abortion, but immigration.
So Michael, how did you react when you heard about the president's actions at the border?
I don't have any problems with that, and I'm a staunch Republican, and like I said, I mean, something has to be done. So let's try not to get so upset that he's going to do something, because we begged him to do something, haven't we? And now that he's done something, unfortunately, we had grandstanding by all the Republican senators and yesterday, and they were very upset, saying it's a political move.
Do you agree with that? Do you agree it's a political move?
No, I don't, because we begged him as Republicans to do something. He's finally doing something. So let's give him no breaks. I guess we're not going to get many breaks, Mimi.
All right, Michael. We'll talk to you in about a month. Rick, Republican in Nampa, Idaho. Hi, Rick.
Hey, top of the morning to you, Mimi. This is Rick Aitchison, America, retired gunnery sergeant. There's 4 subjects I want to bring to the light, and they're all based on mathematical calculations. We've been at 4 and 8 for 71 years, and you've been paying for it. We've been paying for refugees $3,032 a month. You're paying for it. Doctors and dreamers at the border, $7 million a week. Now we have asylum seekers. If he put 4 programs on the table, who paid the less? Donald J. Trump. He paid $6 billion, $14 billion, $9 billion, $900 million for 4 and 8, 29.9. You compare that to President Truman's 1946 to 52, $39 billion. President Trump dropped the hammer day one. Now we're reinventing the wheel that President Trump started back when he took office. This is a day late, dollar short. Republicans got it right. Mike Johnson, stand on point. C-SPAN, Washington Journal, Mimi, thank you for your hospitality, America. Be safe, be smart. And I'm taking your job, Pete Buttigieg, as Secretary of Transportation. Have a good day, America.
All right, and let's take a look at more from President Biden, who talked about his administration's efforts to on immigration. Here he is.
I believe that immigration has always been the lifeblood of America. We're constantly renewed by an infusion of people and new talent. The Statue of Liberty is not some relic of American history. It stands for who we are as the United States. So I will never demonize immigrants. I'll never refer to immigrants as poisoning the blood of a country. And further, I'll never separate children from their families at the border. I will not ban people from this country because of their religious beliefs. I will not use the U.S. military to go into neighborhoods all across the country to pull millions of people out of their homes and away from their families, to put detention camps while awaiting deportation, as my predecessor says he will do if he occupies his office again. On my very first day as president, I introduced a comprehensive immigration reform plan to fix our broken system, secure our border, provide a pathways for citizenship for dreamers, and a lot more. And I'm still fighting to get that done. But we must face the simple truth. To protect America as a land that welcomes immigrants, we must first secure the border and secure it now. The simple truth is there is a worldwide migrant crisis. And if the United States doesn't secure our border, there's no limit to the number of people who may try to come here, because there's no better place on the planet than the United States of America. For those who say the steps I've taken are too strict, I say to you that be patient. And goodwill of American people are wearing thin right now. Doing nothing is not an option. We have to act. We must act consistent with both our law and our values as Americans.
We're getting your reaction to the president's executive action on the border. And we have this as a text from Kevin in Windsor, Connecticut. The Republicans had 2 opportunities to fix the border. Once, when Trump was in office, Republicans were in charge of the store and they would not make a law. Second time, when there was a deal on the table, but Trump told Republicans not to make the deal. Finally, Biden shut the border. Now Republicans are mad about it. And Dave in Orlando, Florida says something has got to be done. Anything is better than nothing. Let us move on to helping the American people. And Larry in Milford, Michigan, this executive order is 12 million illegal aliens too late. Let's go to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Independent Line. James, hello.
That was a good move Mr. Biden did yesterday. And all of that theater going on with Larry Johnson yesterday, that's all that is theater. 'Cause he knows he's got young, old folks out here that'll believe anything and everything that he's telling them. It's just like the Garland hearing yesterday. It was just all theater, waste of taxpayers' money. And the day before with Fauci, all they wanted to do, they're doing is campaigning for Donald Trump because they're weak. Jim Jordan is so. I cannot wait till that man gets completely out of Washington. We can run him slap out of Washington D.C.
So James, you're in favor of what the president did. What do you?
We have to have immigration because I'm not calling Americans lazy, but there's jobs in this country that Americans just absolutely will not do, and they won't the pay is too low. And these Mexicans, they'll come over here and work from daylight to dark. I've seen them. I see them all the time. They're building houses on this beach like it's going out of style, and they start at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they're still hammering out there at 7 o'clock at night, building these houses. And I look around, and all I see, as far as an American, are the supervisors. I don't understand. Americans can get out. They will not. They won't work. Our hotels on the beach are the same way. We have Jamaicans, Russians, Mexicans.
All right. And Donnie is a Democrat in St. Louis, Missouri. Good morning, Donnie.
Good morning. I agree with Joe Biden, what he's doing, and with the other callers that said that the Republicans held up the bill for immigration reform to aid President Trump. But and then they told him that he had the power. Biden had the power to do it. They didn't need to pass the bill. Well, when he did it, now they're complaining. So I agree with what Biden has done.
So, Donnie, let me ask you this, because we've got this from Chad on Facebook, and I want to hear what you think. Chad says all he had to do is not touch anything. Trump had everything going in the right direction. What do you think of that?
I do not think Trump had everything going in the right direction. He separated those families. He put them in cages. Trump's policy was not the best policy, and the only reason it was enacted was because of COVID, that he could do that. When he stopped the people from coming across the border like that, it was because of COVID. It wasn't because he handled the immigration policy as it should have been done, going through the laws and making it so that it would stand up. So, no, I don't.
Sorry, Donnie. And this is in Mountain Home, Arkansas, Republican line. Joel, good morning.
Good morning. How you doing this morning?
Good.
Well, I got a few notes, and I'll move on. We do not need an open border. That's it. We do not need an open border. Our Constitution tells us we will secure our border. China secures their border. Turkey secures their border. Blah, blah, blah. Now that we're 6 months away for election to come up, and Joe knows that the American people are very unhappy with this mess we're in. Now, he's let in no telling how many people, 15, 20, 25 million people have come through this last 3.5 years. We don't know where they are, who they are, or anything. And that's what we're faced now. I'm a senior American. I served in the military. I defended this country. And we have disgraced this country for the ones that are buried in Arlington and all these national cemeteries. What did they fall and die for? Why? Why didn't we secure this border? Joe had the power the first day in office to secure. He stopped the oil production. He raised the gas price. He raised the oil price. He raised the food price. But he stands there and tell us that he can't secure this border. He has the power to pay these student loans off. He has the power to anything that can get votes, and that's what he's doing. But now that we are 6 months away, he's worried. Now, he's not going to get the reelection. They're going to put somebody else up because they know he can't comprehend everything. But and in the last, and one more thing, in the last 3.5 years he's been in office, he has gone through $10 to $11 trillion. Where did the money go? Okay, thank you for listening today.
And also on the Republican line in Redwood City, California, Rob, it's your turn.
Okay, well, with regard to the border, it's too little, too late. he's now just pandering to his base so that he can, the American people actually, so that he can look like he's doing something productive. But however, the fact of the matter is, over the last 3 years, he has been completely liberal about it because he's a globalist. He also thinks that that somehow these people who've come across the border illegally should be welcome to vote. The Democrats want to expand their database, and the congressional districts, I guess they're called. It's been too little, too late, and now he's making a pivot and moving forward in the opposite direction. So
Rob, let me ask you a question. According to American law, anybody that comes into the United States that gets onto American soil has the right to claim asylum. Do you think that law should be changed? That people just don't have the right to claim asylum?
It's not about claiming asylum. That law is a good law in itself, but most people come for financial benefits. They don't come because they are. It's legitimate, and we should accept in open arms people who come because they are their lives are threatened by gangs in Central or South America. That's not a problem. It's that most of the people, 80, 90, I don't know what percentage, but they are coming across because they want a better life. And nobody can blame them for that. But you have to have a process, and it's unfair to the people who have come before and done it the right way when you then let these interlopers come at the last minute, and they're coming across, and they might pretend that it's a proper asylum application, but the fact of the matter is they just want a better life.
So Rob, let me ask you this one last question, which is, do you think that there should be more funding at the border for those immigration judges to assess quickly if this is a real asylum claim or if this is somebody just either making it up or exaggerating?
There you go. That's what I was trying to articulate. A real asylum claim or somebody just making it up. Okay.
But I guess,
the answer
but
is,
you would be in favor of more funding.
I don't know if it's more about more funding. We definitely need more capacity. We need a bigger pipeline to take care of, the applications, because we've been inundated with a ton more people. So I don't know if we need more funding or we already have the proper capacity. But I guess at this point right now, to deal with the influx of all the people, we probably do need more in the budget to hire more, or maybe just allocate more throughout the country into that particular area. More judges throughout the country to focus on that area, because we've got such a huge influx of people.
All right.
I don't know if it's a budget issue or if it's just, a temporary thing.
All right. Got it, Rob. And Sergio is a Democrat in McAllen, Texas. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, I applaud what President Biden is doing. Some people are complaining already that too little, too late. Trump is already talking about, it's going to be a disaster. Well, at least he's doing something right now. This is a broken system. And yes, we need to be honest. Not everyone that comes to the U.S. Qualifies for asylum. It's a very complex journey. I believe what the previous caller was saying, I kind of agree with him that maybe that law should be amended, updated. Because, yes, not everyone that comes here to the U.S. and says, hey, I'm afraid of gangs in Central America. Well, it's a legit fear, but that doesn't merit, in my opinion, asylum. Asylum is more like oppression in the country you're coming from, religious.
So, Sergio, in this case, these are going to be people between the ports of entry. They would not get an asylum hearing. Once it's closed, they get deported. And everybody, those that are coming for financial reasons and those with legitimate asylum claims, they all get turned back. So what do you think of that?
Well, yes, they will be deported. They will be sent back. But I live in the border. I live in the Rio Grande Valley. So you know what's going on down here. People up there in the upstates probably don't know the situation down here, but well, we know, and it's a fact that a lot of these people are going back. They're gonna come back the next day or the next week. Trust me. That's how the system is broken. Yes, and we need more resources down here. We need more border patrol. Although Republicans don't agree, we need more manpower. And it's a broken system. I wish we had something like in the 80s with Ronald Reagan. That program helped a lot of people come the right way, and it was more humane as well. But I don't think we're going to have that amnesty program anymore anytime soon, especially if Mr. Trump comes back. Down here in the Valley, I don't know if you guys know, but we have Florida state troopers in the Rio Grande Valley that Governor Abbott brought from Florida, I guess, to help with the situation. But we know it's just a political move that Abbott is doing. So we have a police state down here in the Valley with these Florida state troopers that are here. And, I mean, it's just a mess. And I applaud Biden because at least he's doing something. Yeah, people might call it, it's a political move. But you know what? He's doing something. And now, well, let's see how it works. Hopefully he stays for 4 more years, and let's see what happens. But it's a broken system, and hopefully things get better. Yes, we do have a lot of all the shelters down here. They're at full capacity pretty much, but we know these people, these immigrants are going up. Basically, the Valley is just like a one-stop. Eventually, they want to move to the upper states.
All right, Sergio. And this is Tav on X, who says this was needed months ago. This should also stop the excessive inflow of immigrants who used asylum as an excuse. Over 300,000 asylum seekers were turned down, but still managed to cross our borders. Sherry is next. Reading, Pennsylvania, Democrat. Good morning.
Hi, I'm Sherry, and I appreciate you taking my call. First off, they're right. There is a lot of immigration coming in. But you know what? The Indians were the owners of this land. We all immigrated into this country. They couldn't control their borders because there were too many of us. So now we're looking at all these people that want to come here. As you know, invaders is what a lot of Republican people see them as. They need help. And as far as how much inflation there is, there's greedy people in this country that charge super amounts of money for food. Your corner stores do it. To rent places for a room, $200 a month. It's the greedy entrepreneurs that are making it rough. For the food, for everything. People don't have to charge what they're charging. And as far as Biden doing it, finally, because you know what? He figured out the Republicans weren't going to work with him.
All right, Sherry, let's take a look at Ted Cruz. Here is Senator Ted Cruz reacting to the executive order yesterday on Fox News.
This thing is utterly fake. It's a joke. Biden knows it's a joke. Now, I will say what's notable. He finally admitted today that he could have done something about this from the very beginning. He could have issued this order in 2021. He could have issued this order in 2022. He could have issued this order in 2023. He could have issued it last month or the month before. And he didn't. Why? Because he wants the 11 million illegals who have invaded this country. This is the outcome they want. They see them all as future Democrat voters. And so if people have to die, if people have to be murdered, if Laken Riley has to die, Joe Biden and the Democrats are okay with it. If the 2 NYPD officers shot this week by a Venezuelan illegal immigrant who was captured, we had him in Eagle Pass, Texas, and what did Joe Biden do? He let him go, and that Venezuelan went to New York and shot 2 cops. That's happening every week, and this has nothing to do with securing the border. This is all about the election in 5 months, and this is political camouflage. Joe Biden wants to say, I solved the problem, and it's all a prop. He thinks the voters are stupid, and they're going to ignore the last 3.5 years.
And just a couple more calls until we move to open forum. We'll hear from Robert next in Talmadge, Ohio. Independent. Good morning.
Hello. How are you doing today? Thank you for taking my call. I just want to say that Joe Biden hasn't been a good president. And The border, he's been horrible. He's been horrible for black people. He's just, I don't know. It's kind of crazy and stuff like that. I wouldn't be voting for him at all. I didn't vote for him or Barack Obama or Trump. I'm going to vote for the couch. And I hope that they can get the border together, because China don't let nobody in. And the guy said before, people from Turkey don't let them in or anything. But the thing is, why is we allowing everybody to come to America and you can't even take care of American people? I don't know.
And Jesse is in Olympia, Washington, Democrat. Good morning, Jesse.
Well, good morning. Hey, about the asylum at the border. I basically agree with it partially, the way Biden's doing it. Like the lady over there in Pennsylvania, I think it was 3 calls ago, lady from Pennsylvania, how she mentioned, hey, let's just look at it, just realistically, and let's throughout the years historically. This used to, all the indigenous and Mexico. This all used to be their land. I think it was in the Mexican-American War when the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo came out. And we're talking portions of Arkansas, Georgia, New Mexico, and California, Texas, Colorado. I mean, we're talking a lot of states that used to be Mexican territory. I think they gave up like 55% of their own territory, which they sold pennies on the dollar for it in that treaty for all that territory. And it was all a force because, of course, the colonialists and United States were moving toward the West to take as much land as they could seize, what they were doing from the indigenous
So, Jesse,
nations.
getting back to the order at the southern border, do you agree with what the president is doing? Do you think he should have done it sooner?
Well, the thing with that border thing is, I agree. Hey, the asylum thing, like I said, a lot of territory was Mexico. So specifically for the Mexicans, not the other countries, people that are coming from other countries down in Central and South America. I don't think the asylum should be for them, more or less. They have to go through a certain process, but they need to be a little bit more lenient for Mexico, the people that are indigenous to Mexico, because this was their land. Like I said, 65 or 55% of the land of the states that I just mentioned, those belong to Mexico. So there's got to be Mexico still considers those portions their motherland. So they need to be a little bit more lenient and understanding. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
All right. And we will transition to open forum. So any topic that's on your mind, we will take your calls until the top of the hour, so 8 a.m. Eastern. You can give us a call. The numbers are on your screen. Republicans, 202-748-8001. Democrats, 202-748-8000. And Independents, 202-748-8002. And we will hear now from Attorney General Garland. He was at yesterday's hearing speaking out against GOP threats to hold him in contempt for not turning over audio tapes of President Biden's interview with Special Counsel Robert Hur.
Nothing will deter me from fulfilling my obligation to uphold the rule of law. Fulfilling that obligation includes ensuring that the Justice Department respects Congress's important role in our democracy. That is why we have gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure that the committee gets responses to its legitimate requests for information. That is why I have provided the committee with Special Counsel Hur's report, why the special counsel testified for more than 5 hours, and why we have gone beyond precedent to provide the committee with the transcripts of the special counsel's interview with the president. But we have made clear that we will not provide audio recordings from which the transcripts that you already have were created. Releasing the audio would chill cooperation with the department in future investigations, and it could influence witnesses' answers if they thought the audio of their law enforcement interviews would be broadcast to Congress and the public. Now, in response, certain members of this committee and the Oversight Committee are seeking contempt as a means of obtaining, for no legitimate purpose, sensitive law enforcement information that could harm the integrity of future investigations. This effort is only the most recent in a long line of attacks on the Justice Department's work.
So Attorney General Garland, from yesterday's hearing, you can watch the entire hearing on our website at cspan.org. And we're an open forum, and we'll talk to Jim in Mart, Texas, Republican.
Yes, ma'am. I'd just like to comment on the border just a minute.
Sure.
When you come in legally into the United States, we let in about 1 million a year legally. You come, it's just like knocking on somebody's door. If they know you, they'll let you come in the house. You're not going to let strangers come into your house. You don't know anything about them. And I'm talking to a lot of the Democrats out there that want to let anybody come into their house. But I'll guarantee you, if you ask them, or if 100 people walked up to their house and say, well, I only know 5 of you. 5 of you is wonderful people. I'll let y'all in, but the rest of you, y'all stay out. Because that's a good policy. That's the policy we have at the border. Because you come in legally, you get checked out. You're not make sure you're not a murderer, a rapist, a drug dealer, like the murderer that come in, kill the Lake and Riley girl, kill the 2 police officers. They come in illegally because Biden allowed them to come in. They didn't get checked out. Therefore, they murdered people. You don't allow people. You don't allow people to come in your house. You don't allow people. You only open the door for people if you know 3 or 4 or 5 people and they've been checked out. You know them.
So here's my question, Jim. If there was better screening at the border, would you still allow the asylum seekers to come in and claim asylum?
Look, all that's just a smokescreen. Ted Cruz had it just right. All that is just another Biden lie. Biden's a traitor. He's nothing but a traitor. He's allowed murder and killers to come into this country. Cartels, it's nothing but a ruse. If you'll do the math, that's almost 1 million more people that you're allowing to come into the country illegally, murderers, killers, just like the ones that shot the 2 police officers the other day. He allowed them to come in. The Lake and Riley murder, he allowed them to come in. There was another girl there in Texas. Her name was Michelle. She got murdered. There's several out there that got murdered, and Biden allowed them to come in this country because they were not checked out. And all this mess that he's going on about right now, and Merrick Garland, he is guilty too. He's nothing but a traitor.
Let's go to the independent line, Dunlan, Florida. John, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, it's Dunellen, but it was close.
Okay.
As far as the border, I would like to say a couple words on it. If we're talking about asylum claims have to be processed. Once you get out of your country, your home country, and you get into the next country, that's the country you have to claim asylum in if you want to come to the United States. So everybody saying the asylum system it's broken. Well, no, it's broken because these people are coming from, I guess, 80 or 90 different countries at this point, and instead of the next country they get to, they claim asylum to the United States. They're not. They're just bypassing everything and coming right to here. So they should be turned away immediately. There shouldn't even be a claim of asylum. It should say, go back. You're not going to be processed. So that would nip that in the bud. As far as the Joe Biden's border policy, I was told that he wasn't able to do any of this without Congress. I mean, he said to
the general public. I can't do anything. You know, the bipartisan border deal that they were screaming about when it was only 3 Republicans on board with them, Langford and a couple others, Mitt Romney, I believe. So what happened to that? Now all of a sudden, magically, he's able to do it. This president is the biggest liar I have ever had the misfortune of having to live through. This man has got not one ounce of decency in his body. He persecutes his political rivals, which is third world banana country garbage. And now all of a sudden, 5 months before the election, because his poll numbers are so bad that he opened the border wide open. He threw away every Trump rule. He's member on the first day of office where he signed the executive orders, getting rid of all the Trump executive orders that had the border the most secure it's ever been in the history of the country. And now 5 months before the election, because they know politically it's hurting them, he's going to go ahead and say, oh, now I can do it. It's absolute. This guy is the biggest liar, not to mention the economy and every damn thing else this guy is ruined. And let's not forget his son's on trial for gun charges this week, and then they're going to have a tax evasion trial where he says everybody's got to pay his fair share of taxes except him and his son that hasn't paid $1.8 million that they got him on. The statute of limitations ran out on the other $7 million that he was given from. This guy is the worst. I mean, I was on the fence about voting for Trump again, but after that political persecution and this border stunt, forget about it. Anybody who votes for Joe Biden is brain dead.
All right,
at this
John.
point.
Michelle is in Brooklyn, New York, Democrat. Good morning.
Good morning. 2 things I want to say. First of all, the immigration issue is a ping-pong game. The Republicans doesn't want to fix it because they need it every time you have election. They will always patch it. Whenever there is an election, they will need that topic. This is why they will never fix it. The second thing I want to say is that people talking about immigration, they don't know, most of people don't know what the U.S. did during the 70s and 80s during the Cold War in Central America. That put Central America and South America in the state it is now. How they support those dictators, which was stealing money, which was oppressing the people. They know that was happening. They didn't do anything about it, as long those people were fighting or were defending the United States interests. Central America in the state it is now because of what happened during the Cold War, during the 70s and 80s. Because people were stealing money, they were not helping the people, the U.S., France, Spain. They know what was happening, but they didn't do anything about it. Now, those people, they are poor. They are in a situation that they don't want to send in their country. It's not their fault. It's simply because what happened during the 70s, during the Cold War in Central America. Thank you.
Gary is a Republican in Erie, Pennsylvania. Good morning.
Good morning. I just want to talk about the border real quick. Sounds to me like Biden just put a Band-Aid on the problem. I mean, personally, I feel like he lies on every subject. I mean, he lied that he couldn't do anything. He lied to everybody. And basically he's failed on every front as a president. Anyone that votes for this guy should have their head examined. Have a nice day.
Okay. Let's talk to Constance in Chesapeake, Virginia, Democrat. Good morning.
Good morning, dear. I'm glad that I get to speak now because I've just heard several phone calls slanting our wonderful President Biden. He's not a liar. These people have obviously been listening to Fox News and lies on the YouTube or whatever on these computers. The media is ruining the minds of people and slanting them from the truth. Joe Biden is a wonderful human being, and he's doing everything he can to save our democracy. And closing the border at this point is a very wise choice. I just wish maybe we could have made that a few months ago. But these Republicans are repugnant in the way they try to prevent the United States from success, from doing the right thing. They are a tribe a cult of I don't know what they are anymore. They're a combination of everything wicked. And yeah, they're trying to seize our government. It was a coup, and I would love to see some of these people put before a firing squad for treason.
All right, Constance. And let's take a look at Republican Matt Gaetz. He was questioning Attorney General Garland yesterday about alleged coordination between the DOJ and the Manhattan prosecutors. Here it is.
Attorney General, you've told us that it's a dangerous conspiracy theory to allege that the Department of Justice is communicating with these state and local prosecutions against Trump. You can clear it all up for us right now. Will the Department of Justice provide to the committee all documents, all correspondence between the department and Alvin Bragg's office and Fonnie Willis's office and Letitia James's office?
The offices you're referring to are independent offices of state.
I get that. I get that.
State.
The question is whether or not you will provide all of your documents and correspondence. That's the question. I don't need a history lesson.
Well, I'm going to say again, we do not control those offices. They make their own decisions.
The question is whether you communicate with them, not whether you control them. Do you communicate with them, and will you provide those communications?
If you make a request, we'll refer it to our Office of Legislative Affairs.
But see, here's the thing. You come in here and you lodge this attack that it's a conspiracy theory that there is coordinated lawfare against Trump. And then when we say, fine, just give us the documents, give us the correspondence, and then if it's a conspiracy theory, that will be evident. But when you say, well, we'll take your request, and then we'll sort of work it through the DOJ's accommodation process, then you're actually advancing the very dangerous conspiracy theory that you're concerned about. Now, you were a judge, once nominated the highest court in our country. When you were a judge, I'm just curious, did you ever make political donations to partisan candidates?
No.
No, and you didn't because that would create the potential appearance of impropriety.
I didn't because there's a federal rule barring federal judges from making contributions.
Right, but under that same theory of attacks on the judicial process, like shouldn't someone be owed like a jury of their peers and a judge that's non-biased rather than getting a judge from your political opponent's donor file?
I'm well aware that you're not asking a hypothetical. You're asking me to comment on a jury verdict in another jurisdiction which has to be respected. I won't comment on it. That case is still ongoing. The defendant
Mr. Attorney General, I hadn't asked you about the verdict yet. We were getting there. I was talking about the judge.
And we are in open forum, so we'll take a call from Tim in Bowie, Maryland, Republican.
Oh, good morning. Thank you for taking my call. Americans, we're very passionate. And my thought is we shouldn't allow that passion to cloud reasonable judgment. So just a comment on the border. 4 years ago, we hear a lot of comments about how, immigration was better. Well, we got to also consider the fact that we were coming out of a pandemic. There was Title 42 in place. It was very easy to bar people from coming into the country, coupled with the fact that a lot of people, or should I say there wasn't a lot of movement in any case. So if we look at data to compare what was happening 4 years ago and what's happening today, well, it makes sense that there will be a surge at the border because now there's a pandemic. And, people are seeking a better life for whatever reason. They're leaving their country to come to the greatest country on the planet.
Tim, what would you think is the best way to handle that surge at the border?
The executive branch, right, and our Congress, I believe, work together at some point to try and come up with a solution. Unfortunately, we are in an election year. And, I think in an election year, there is the need to have talking points and there's a need to have certain things that people can campaign on. I think that the current attempt by the president to stem the flow of immigration at the border is commendable. I think that maybe this could have been done earlier. However, just like how the opponents, I won't say, I don't like to, demarcate Americans as Republican or Democrat, but I'd say that one side of the aisle, has its talking points as a campaign issue, some of which they effectively torpedoed a bipartisan legislation to help what's going on at the border, right? And the president, maybe from a strategic standpoint, has decided that it's time for him to take executive action to help his cause to plead his case to the American people that he has done something. So let's be reasonable.
All right. And Robert is in Staten Island, New York, Democrat. Good morning.
Yeah, hi, good morning. I'm just sort of recovering from all these kind of loud people you've had on this morning. But as far as the border goes, I'd like to see something done special for Mexicans and Canadians since they're our neighbors. And then once we can get them on board with us, maybe we can start looking at joint solutions for how to deal with all these other folks that want to be part of this great system. But we just can't accommodate all of them. I don't know what the right number is, but they're not. The government needs to tell us how many people we can accommodate so that we can work on sort of sorting this out. I have no idea what the right number is. I'd like to know more about that so that I could think about what's the best way to accomplish some achievable goal and still be the country that we are without turning into Turkey or China or some of these other countries that your Republican callers mentioned. We're not those countries. I don't want to be those countries. You can leave here, get on a plane and fly to one of those countries if you want. They'd probably take you in. But I want to be here. I'm an American. I want to make America better. Thank you. Have a great day.
And Robert, we are going to be having a reporter joining us in about 10 minutes to talk more about immigration and this action specifically at the border. Rip in Fredericksburg, Virginia, Republican. You're next.
Good morning to all people. Listen, we're in such horrible trouble, and everybody keeps saying, 12, 10, 30 million people. We've got over 100 million illegal immigrants in this nation, and it's going to get a lot worse. We've got so much land. Bottom line is that you've just destroyed our children. COVID created an environment where the kids couldn't be in school. They've set them back untold numbers of years, and just unbelievable dysfunction is going on with our youth right now. Everything is about the youth. Everything is about plants that are growing in the garden. What are you going to have when they grow? Thing with kids, and I can't believe that. I think that's my personal opinion. I could always be wrong. I believe that Joe Biden destroyed the United States of America. I don't think coming back. I don't even think that Trump could undo what Biden has done. This is the largest migration that has ever happened in the history of mankind, and it's still going on. Biden is not with it, and that's my personal opinion.
Well, Rip, former President Trump has said that he would do mass deportations and use the military to do that. Or would you be in favor of that?
How can you do that? Tell me this. Somebody that's taken all their life savings and come to the United States, and then we take them and kick them back out. What do you think the enemy that you've created there is going to be? It's going to be an enemy for the rest of their lives. They're going to try to get back at us. I mean, everybody would do that. And that's human nature.
So you'd be against the deportations?
I would be for deportation, but I would be against what the result of deportation is going to be. I don't know how on earth this has all been thought out. This think tanks have thought all of this through. This was a plan. None of this was by mistake, and Republicans are just as responsible for this as Democrats are. The scourge of the United States of America are politicians. They're all rich. How do you get a job and all of a sudden become extraordinarily wealthy, and then somebody says, well, we're going to we're going to cut that off. No, they're not going to cut that off. They would do anything to keep you. And people do and vote and act in accordance with what is going to enable them to keep their job. That's human nature. Our country is gone, and the war is going to take place in the United States. And I think it's going to be biological.
You're starting to break up, Rip, but we got your point. Lee is in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, independent.
Hey, Mimi Gorgeous. What's up? Am I on?
Yes, you're on. Go right ahead, Lee.
Oh, I forgot. Last time you cut me off because I was going to read my essay, but I'm not going to do that this time. But I want to give a shout-out to y'all because y'all are the purest, most awesome form of media in the universe, basically, because you get real sincere opinions on this channel where everything else is just scripted, you know. But anyway, I want to give a shout-out to all the fat cats in America that are up and rising since the 5 months before tribulation is upon us. And basically, I just want to let everybody know since 52. I was 52. I was 51 last time I called. Now I'm playing with a full deck, so I want to give a shout-out to the fat cats and reveal America's hand. In the grand scheme of world poker, when all four royal flushes are dealt on the same table at the same time, all of a sudden the old ace of spades becomes the most powerful card in all of poker. Well, God dealt America back in spades, and I've only got one eye. So you do the math as to who's going to win the pot. Now you know why Lemmy doesn't give a crap about living forever. Just give the man his ace of spades, right? Now that we know who secured the pot, let's discuss the rest of you losers' final options. You got basket case bill. It's the primary option, and you can function in that society as long as you have lots of money, but it gets old quick, and God forbid you run out of cash, because then the secondary option sure seems viable, which is suicide. The third option, which is
all right,
Jesus
Lee, we're
Christ.
going to move on to David in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Democrat. Good morning.
Yes, you say David?
Yes, you're on. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. I'm a 77-year-old white man here in Albuquerque. Everybody says we're the greatest country on earth. We once was, but one thing for sure, we're the stupidest country on earth now. And believe me, I have sympathy for anybody and everybody. But there used to be a saying, is charity starts at home. And we can't take care of the whole world like this. We know why they're coming here. Of course, they want a better life, and some they want to come here and help destroy our country. And I'm a Vietnam veteran, and our country, our government, does not mind sending American men and women to different countries to help them from being invaded by supposedly enemies and who wants to take over and all. And we won't put our military on our border to say, hey, get in line, go back home, do the paperwork, we'll get to you. Now, it's impossible for it to work perfectly. Nothing does. But our government, honestly, I'm a Democrat, doesn't mean anything anymore. But, our politicians are worthless anymore. They don't care about us. And the one thing, it's going to get nasty here in the United States. Maybe not in my lifetime. I don't know how much time I have left. But I wish there was some way it could be prevented from these politicians getting in their nice big planes, going somewhere where they're already set up, and say, well, we finally had to get out because it was getting rough. I wish there was some way they would have to be here and take consequences of what they've done to America. I mean, we're a cesspool now.
All right. And Clifford, Oceanside, California, Republican.
Good morning. I'd like to thank you for taking my call this morning. I'd like to go ahead and say that the fellow Democrats out there, the Republican was saying that they had to have their head examined. That's correct, they do. But all you have to do is, I have some Democratic friends out here that by talking to them logically and getting them to realize how bad Joe Biden is the president, because sometimes they just don't have the ability to understand reality, but by talking to them logically and speaking to them, not by yelling to them or talking down to them, for they are fellow Americans, they will see the light. And I know that some of these Democrats, it takes a little time more than others, but I'm sure that with logic, they will understand and make America great again. For that is what our country needs. Thank you much, Mimi. You are a great host. And
thank you, Clifford, and thanks to everybody who called in. Up next, we'll take a closer look at President Biden's executive action on the border with Michelle Hackman. She's an immigration policy reporter for the Wall Street Journal. We'll be right back.
In the first week of